Hi everyone, welcome to the interview of Beyond Border. This is Betty from China. Now say hi to you from Shanghai, China. At Beyond Border, I will invite guests who have been living and working in different countries and cultures to share with us the valuable lessons that they have learned through their cross-culture journey. Today, let's meet Eric. Eric is the founder of a creative music agency called Music Dish in China. The company focused on the projection and promotion of Chinese live music. Since 2009, Eric arrived in China. His ambition is always about to bring talented Chinese young musicians to the bigger world stage, as well as introducing the world musicians to China. Actually, Eric's background has nothing to do with music or even art. He was trained as a columnist and he used to work as a telecommunication consultant when he was young. But later on, he still chooses to follow his passion about music and enter the music and culture industry. After many years being in China, Eric does not only experience the modality of Chinese society, but also experience the filling streets with smell of great meat, makeshift lights and chatter in small and big cities. He witnesses the fast development of Chinese economy as well as the tremendous efforts that are being made by people here behind the great scene. He sees the specialty of Chinese society, but as most importantly, he finds a common ground between Chinese society and other societies around the world. So Eric, could you introduce us how do you enter the music industry from the economic background and are there many economists just like you, as far as you know?
I was an economist. And there was there was a few years where I was actually a telecom consultant. And it was a really interesting time in telecommunications when the digital revolution was happening in telecommunications, fiber optics and computerized switching. This is what would lay the groundwork to the mobile revolution and the internet revolution. And so the whole industry was going through what at the time was called deregulation and divestiture and et cetera. And they needed economists to figure out. I'm not the only, so there's not a lot of us, but there's a few economists who are kind of invited Alan Kruger to speak at our TGIS events. And Alan Kruger was the chairman of Barack Obama's Economic Council. So this is the Council of Economists that advise the president about policy they should do. And Alan Kruger was the chairman of he's like one of the top 50 economists in the world. I invited him to speak because he's kind of weird. No, he's not. He looks like a California guy, acts like a California guy, like really cool, but he's from New Jersey. Right? And he started a field called rockonomics, which is the economics of popular music, or I would even say popular culture, but he focuses on music. So this is a guy that has sat on the stage with a Barack Obama and Bruce Springsteen. And, he loves music and culture, and me too. So I said, wow, we are kind of the same, except you really went deep into economics and brought culture into economics, and I went out and use economics when I'm working in culture.
So before you came to China, what did you know about China?
I think it was more academic. So anytime there was an exhibition having to do with China, and most of these exhibitions would be having to do with traditional Chinese art, traditional Chinese poetry, or calligraphy, or things like that. So that kind of shapes your mind. I also followed China a lot from Deng Xiaoping, who was kind of like a personal hero to me. I think one of the most important men of the 20th century. I always say China today is Deng Xiaoping's China. Now, I don't care what color is the cat, black or white, as long as it can catch the mouse. So I was really interested also in China's transformation. I had some idea. I remember when the first KFC came to China. And so I was following all this. So that was kind of my perception, but I would call it superficial. Especially a country like China that is so complex, so rich in culture and different people, different cultures within the country, and etc. It's like, for example, of course, my idea of Chinese food was General Tso's chicken and chop suey. This is all you've got. New York, no, but I wasn't as I'd only scratched the surface of Flushing.
What's your first impression about China upon your arrival?
I remember I landed in Beijing at night, so I didn't see anything when I was brought to my hotel. I was staying right outside the Temple of Heaven, so not the swankiest neighborhood either. Kind of like it's kind of like a poorer section, right? And I wake up in the morning and go out my hotel, and so I'm facing the wall of the Temple of Heaven. And from one side of the street is coming, I think it was an Audi or BMW, something like that. Nice, fancy, cool car. From the other side of the street is a guy pedaling. On the back is literally more stuff than I'd ever seen being peddled on the back. They just, this might be like recycling board, recycling cardboard, but like a mountain of cardboard that he's like peddling. And of course gave the image of China when everybody was biking, right? Incredible. But at the time it was mostly either people like, on those motorized little tricycles or fancy cars. And I was like, oh my God, here's this contrast, like right in front of me. My first image of China, I'm like, I'm in China. I was like, it just hit me. Wow, this is different. So in some ways overwhelming, but after the trip, I was on the express train, from Dongximen to the airport. I had this impression this was like one of the best trips I had.
What made you decide to come to China to develop your business?
I'm an economist, but I don't do business in a very business way.
Yeah.
Most of my things in business are I have an epiphany. Like, St. Paul, who God blinds and says, why are you killing my people? He has an epiphany. Right? Kind of like that, except I didn't get blinded. I wasn't killing anybody. And the epiphany was a voice that said, music dish should do something in China.
Yeah.
And then there was this other voice. When you have an angel on one shoulder and a devil on the other. It's a typical Western thing where the two sides of you are arguing. So the second voice goes, that's crazy. You don't know nothing about music in China. What are you talking about? And then the first voice says, shut up. I'll just learn. But it's a healthy debate, because kind of I listened to the first voice, which was like, like any New Yorker, don't tell a New Yorker something's not possible, because then they will go about proving you wrong.
Who are the Chinese musicians you're working with?
Well, a lot of the artists I have worked with are artists that have been, they're kind of the pioneers.
Yep.
Like Arshou Meigui, probably one of the biggest rock bands in China. Dongbei Yaohui.
Okay.
They've been on the scene, I think, 17 years, maybe 18 years. So they started from, and literally that generation of artists and bands had no possibilities. There were no major festivals that could pay them or etc. They did it purely for the passion and love. This is like really the idea. Can rock and roll change your life? Well, for that generation, yes, it did.
Okay.
Right. And it's incredible working with people like that. And I think in the States, that's kind of gotten forgotten. It's kind of more of an industry. And maybe in China, it's starting to become like that here too.
Mm-hmm.
But because of the challenges, not so much. But for that generation especially, they did it for the love.
In your personal experience, what's your observation in terms of differences and similarities between Chinese and American people?
Chinese strikingly, out of all East Asians, are the most like Americans. You go in a Chinese restaurant and it's one of the loudest experiences you've ever. I'm talking about Beijing at least. It's one of the loudest experiences. And you know what? Americans are loud. China today is a lot like America in the 50s.
Okay.
Everything is possible.
Okay.
And you see that from the government to the people. It's good to become rich. I think it is really at the core of an American idea. Europeans don't believe that. Europeans talk about egalitarianism. In Scandinavian countries, the richer you are, the more you're taxed, and etc. In America, they celebrate richness. They celebrate success. It is something to be celebrated, not to be envied. Well, you may envy because you want to be rich also, but not to be put down. So Steve Jobs and Jeff Bezos and all these people, and I think China's the same thing. they all strive for success and they all respect success. And so, very much like that, is a lot of similarities. And it, especially the younger generation, they're not going for traditional jobs or trying to get a government job or something like that. No, they want to open a startup, they want to open a boutique, a cafe, their own thing. That entrepreneurial, it's very American.
Yeah.
Do you think it can be a problem if people put too much weight and emphasis on money?
Yeah, so I think it's not that they're rejecting money, but it's not the overriding, getting rich quick. It's not the overriding goal. It's creating something that has value, quality, that maybe contributes something positive. And I see a lot of young people in Beijing doing that. And so I don't think there's and that's
But
more the entrepreneurial than the Warren Buffett, Jack
okay.
Ma and et cetera type of mentality. This is more, it can be small scale, but is it something that's good and it's going to bring in?
Do you think sometimes some of your American friends who have never traveled to China before might have certain misunderstanding towards Chinese?
Of course. Well, I mean, people's opinions are shaped by what they know. Information is being sent to them, and unless someone is really curious, broadly, there's really warped perceptions. I've traveled in a lot of countries. I'm just totally surprised at how ignorant people are of their planet and of the different people on their planet, and because they just believe what they're told. And I think everybody should just hop on a plane or hop on a boat and go somewhere else and find out. Because you're normally, okay, if you learn it from someone that's been there, you can learn something. But most people are lazy.
True.
And so they just turn on the TV and they say, oh, I saw this, or I saw this on the internet, or something like that. It's like, that's probably the worst place to get information. There's little things that I say just, because of course the perception is that, like Americans always think they live in the greatest country in the world and everything's great and et cetera. And I'll tell them, in China, I never pull out my wallet. I pay for everything with my mobile phone. And then they might start saying, oh, that's starting to happen in America. I go, no, the old lady on the corner selling fruits and vegetables, like on the street, like she just laid out her blanket and put the fruit. I pay for that with my mobile phone. And they're like, what? Dockless bikes. It started here, not there. So this idea that, China, and some people still have it, that China, they can't innovate. All they can do is copy and et cetera. And so I try to teach them that, no, China is one of the most exciting places to do business. I also I think one thing that people don't realize is, if you've ever been to Midi Festival, Midi Festival's got like hard rock, metal, all that. And you see the fans, and they're incredible, right? And I don't think most people understand that youth culture that's happening in China. So that's another thing. It's close to me, what I do.
Yeah.
That's another thing that I explain to people. Fortunately, people that work in the cultural industry usually are curious. So they're willing to open their mind and listen and say, really, is that how China is? What's it like touring or things like that? People in New York ask me what's the difference between Beijing and New York, and I say, funny enough, New York seems a little slow.
Some people say there's a price that China has paid in the exchange of fast development. Do you agree?
So one of the things is that what slows things down in the West is that there's a lot of rules and regulations and laws, right? And the laws, America loves to call himself a law and order country or society. You couldn't have started dockless bikes in New York because we'd have rules of where the bikes could be left and where the bikes could be picked up. So they were all docked bikes. So, and people complain, I would speak to some foreigners who live in China, they complain, oh my God, it's blocking the sidewalks and all that. These dockless bikes are horrible. And I go like, but everybody's biking. Everybody has an efficient way of doing the last mile from the subway to their home or to the office. And the innovation that came from that. I say, so I think, yeah, there's maybe things that are lost, right? But at the same time, if you're in a society where people can, a society where people can experiment, strangely enough, in technology and things like that, you can really experiment here. And that's how innovation is done, because you got to do trial and error, right? And so I can understand for some people it's too much, because some people like, yeah, it's too much to absorb. And I guess I'm used to, like, I've lived on four continents, I travel a lot. I'm used to difference and change and etc. So I love it. But I can understand where for some people it's too much. They want to stay in their quiet village and things stay the same. And that's cool. Different strokes for different folks.
What kind of recommendation would you give to someone who are going to China for the first time?
Well, one, respect that you know nothing. Don't just jump in, because you'll probably lose. Take your time and really get to understand. Like, I spent the first 6 years bouncing back and forth between Beijing and New York, slowly building up my brand here, slowly building up my business, figuring out where was the best fit, what I really wanted to do. And after those 6 years, I really felt I had reached a certain comfort level, and at which point I permanently, like, now based in Beijing.
What do you think the biggest value that art and culture could bring to ordinary people?
Everything in society is telling you the same thing. Live life a certain way. If we're talking about America, it's, okay, so you get out of school, you get your first job, you get married, you buy a house, like there's almost a guidebook. And everything in society, from commercials on TV to everything, is telling you, think this way, this is how society works. Art and culture is one of the only things to tell you, question, stop. Is that make sense? Are there other ways to look at the world? Other ways to live? Other ways to consider? And I think that's the biggest role. It can help break prejudices.
Okay.
Because we all have prejudices, right?
True.
And I think art can help you really. You may not be able to go to China, but you can gain some understanding of China through, I remember for me, Zhang Yimou's and Gong Li's movies were like, whoa, because before that it was all kung fu. But there's indie filmmakers out here, like independent Chinese filmmakers are going out there. At South by Southwest, I met a filmmaker who did a documentary on a young boy monk, Buddhist monk in Nepal, and just following his life in the monastery.
Yeah.
That type of movie. And I saw that at South by Southwest in Texas, so that's, I think, where people can kind of understand China better. And that's what art and culture can do, to gain a greater understanding of what the real China is versus these movies where it's like, fake kung fu with special effects, or, the Rambo style Chinese movies. Was it Wolf Warrior and things like that? That doesn't tell you anything about China.
So that's my conversation with Eric. Eric spends most of his time hanging out with local Chinese since he settled down in China. And that is why you could see his insight about Chinese society and Chinese people do not only stay on abstract theories or superficial level. And maybe this is a very right way to really get to know a new culture. Not only stand and comment the other culture from an outside perspective, but really enter into the culture personally, interact with locals, and see how they think, and really experience the culture as an insider, not outsiders. Because sometimes there can be a giant difference between the experience of insiders and outsiders. So this is today's show, and my name is Betty. I'll see you next time. Bye.